This morning, we're going to have Terry talk about the power of perspective as the slideshow is right now. And before I hand it off to her, I think I'd like to also mention, if you guys have the opportunity, it would be really nice to have your cameras on so that we can have some engagement on this like virtual platform. So if that's possible, that would be awesome. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Terry actually. So take it
Okay.
over.
All right. Thank you, Ruth. And yeah, it's always nice to see faces when you're on this because that's part of the connection is being able to look at folks. But hey, welcome and thanks for showing up today to listen to a little bit about the power of perspective. And really, from my perspective, that's focusing on what's strong versus what's wrong. And the definition of perspective actually is an attitude towards something or a point of view. And if the past few years have taught me anything with all that we've been through, it's been how to tap into that power of perspective. And I'll share more on that in a little bit. But now more than ever, there could be a temptation for us to look backwards and wish for what was. And while that can be a natural reaction, we don't want that to run rampant because it doesn't benefit you and it certainly doesn't benefit the people around you. And so many times, we're human beings. We're thinking about the health of our companies. We're thinking about the health of our people, the health of our family, the health of our teams. And there's nothing wrong with that. But somehow we forget about focusing on our own mental health and what we can do for ourselves, self-care, basically. And a positive perspective is part of that. And when I talk about the power of perspective, I like to share a little bit, a little story with it. And there's a story of a little boy who was playing baseball in his backyard, and his mother was watching him. And he was telling her, "Mom, I'm the world's greatest hitter." So he took his ball, he threw it up in the air, swung the bat, and he missed. He picked up the ball and he said, "I'm the world's greatest hitter." Threw the ball in the air, swung, he struck out again, strike two. So he picked up the ball again. He said, "I'm the world's greatest hitter." Threw that ball in the air, swung the bat, and guess what happened? He struck out again. And he turned around to his mother and says, "Wow, what do you know? I'm the world's greatest pitcher." So it's perspective. It's a great perspective, actually. He's focusing on what is strong about him versus what's wrong with him. Like he could have focused on, geez, I'm a lousy hitter, but instead he saw a different perspective. He said, "You know what? I'm going to focus on the fact that perhaps I'm the world's greatest pitcher." So it's just a kind of fun little story and a good perspective to have because at any point we do have the choice to look at things a little bit differently. So I'd like you to take a look at this picture. And I'm sure you can see the mirror image of the mountains reflected in the water. It's beautiful. I love pictures like this because they look like rugged mountains. And now what I'd like you to do is turn your head so your left ear is touching close to your left shoulder. And tell me what you see now. I mean, you won't be able to tell me, but I'm sure if you look at it for a minute, you could, yes. And I see one of you, yes, David. It's a mother and her child kind of praying. And so once you see that, you never unsee it, actually. I can't look at this picture anymore without just seeing that. But the point of this is that the picture didn't change, your perception of it did. And our mind is like a parachute. It really only works well when open. So I invite you to be open about the power of perspective and think about how if we look at things just a little bit differently, how it can really change. And just by that slight tilt of the head, we see something completely different. So that's the power of perspective. And really, perspective thinking is how we see our lives is how we live our lives. And our perspective is arguably the single greatest aspect of our uniqueness. But perspective often takes a back seat because our mind is so caught up in survival mode and we're too busy doing things rather than slowing down to take it all in. And when I say slowing down, I don't necessarily mean we're stopping, but that I think Nick said it today, that deep breath in that deep breath out allows us to slow down and think about things a little bit differently because there is learning everywhere if we're receptive to it. And do you see things as a challenge or as a negative? Is this a situation or a problem? Because with perspective, the facts haven't changed, your view of them has. So, how are you looking at it? What is this in your mind? Because you do get a choice in how you see a situation or a problem, or if you've seen it positively or negatively. Now, unfortunately and fortunately, as humans, we have a natural tendency to focus on what's wrong versus what's strong. It's called a negativity bias, and we are naturally wired for worry. We are naturally tough on ourselves. We are focusing more on our negative versus our positive. We're looking at what we're not doing right versus what we're doing, uh, our strengths are. Now, unfortunately, this same bias holds true for loved ones or people that we lead or work with. It's super easy to overlook the good and harp on what's wrong versus what's strong. And I'm sure we've all had that time where we remember somebody did something wrong, and that's all we can remember about them. And I challenge you to look for something good about them, focus on something strong. And in fact, our brain is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. But the good news is, with focusing on the power of perspective, you can change that. You can start to attract more positive experiences like Velcro, and hopefully the negative ones then will slide off like Teflon. But it does take practice. It doesn't happen just because we came to this session today or we went to a week-long thing. It's like with anything else, it is, and I think Nick said it today in his session, happiness as a wave that's always moving. And it's the same with perspective and positive and negative ups and downs. But the good news is that expanding your perspective has benefits, lots of them, by the way. It helps to fuel your resilience. And so with resilience, you can quickly bounce back from things. It helps to build that tolerance and empathy and fosters understanding, which who doesn't need that in today's world? It helps us to build psychological and physical well-being, and I'll take more of that. It helps with growth. It helps to have that spiral of growth and really helps us to focus on flourishing and thriving versus just surviving. Like I said, we don't slow down enough to kind of look at that big picture, to look at that perspective. So there are quite a few benefits to having a positive perspective. Now, this type of perspective takes effort. Well, okay, maybe not as much effort as a willingness to look at life through a different lens. Now, I said a willingness to look at life through a different lens. It's just, having a positive perspective helps you in every situation. Now, it doesn't mean you deny reality. It just means you acknowledge that even the toughest circumstances have a way through them. They just do, if you're willing to look at them through a different lens. So how can you do this? Well, with anything that we want to get better at, we have to start with self. We have to start inside and finding perspective in yourself. I always like to think of it like watching yourself like a hawk, because hawks have that distinct advantage of soaring hundreds of feet above the ground. They're looking down on the earth and seeing all that's going on below them before they take action. And even though we're not hawks, looking down upon ourselves in those kind of sticky situations that tend to get the better of us helps us develop a more objective understanding of our behavior. But we have to slow down and we have to allow our brains to process before acting or overreacting. Because I'm sure if you're like me, many of us have sat down and responded to an email that we didn't think through, hit send, and then regretted what we sent because we didn't take a moment to take that deep breath in, deep breath out, and think about what we were saying. Same things happens to us when we're talking to people. We get so caught up in the moment, we may say things that we regret. And so slowing down helps with that. It helps us to kind of be that eagle and take a look at it and say, Do I really need to send this in that email right now? So it's a great way of doing it. Just, I would say to myself, take that deep breath, and that breath definitely helps. You may also have to disconnect if necessary. For me, I like to put my cell phone on the charger on Sundays if I can. I'm not saying I never go to it, but and honestly, it is difficult to do because we're so used to having that thing right next to us or in our pocket or right beside us. But the disconnection is necessary so that you can look at the world through a different lens other than just the phone lens. And then there's the social media diet. Oh, yeah. We've all been through social media where everybody's lives look better than ours do. And that can wreak havoc on our perspective. So, you know what? Don't look through it as much. Check out your phone and see how much screen time you're really using. And even a media diet. I did some research this last year on news, and in a 20-minute period on my local news channel, they repeated the same negative stories 3 times in a 20-minute period. And it's like, you know what? I only need to hear it once. That's all the energy I can allow, and then I move on. So you might have to put yourself on a media diet. And by the way, even our weatherman goes there. I always laugh when the weatherman says 30% chance of rain. And I'm thinking to myself, how about a 70% chance of sunshine? Why do we always go to the side of the negative? 30% chance of rain today. Oh, bring your umbrella. Oh, bother. And so it's really just kind of looking at it differently. What are you going to choose to spend your energy and your time on? Because you really only have so much energy. And if you're going to have a positive perspective, you're going to have to limit some of the things that are coming into your space. And then I like to say, recognize your strengths and be proud of them because, like I said before, we like to focus on what's wrong with us. We don't sit down long enough to focus on what's good about us. What are our strengths? What do you do well? Pat yourself on the back. There are a lot of things that you do well. We just don't stop long enough to really take that time and be proud of them. I mean, tell yourself you're amazing. Tell yourself you're an outstanding cook or you're a terrific leader, whatever it is. But acknowledge your strengths and be proud of them. And then I think that, boy, more now than ever, reflecting on everything we've learned in the past year or two is so important, the good and the bad, because in the end, they all teach us something. And so sit down and think about, all right, so we've had the pandemic. What happened during that was good? And what can I learn from it? What happened that wasn't so good? And what can I learn from it? So it's just kind of reframing it, looking through it through the different lens. What are some good things about it? What did I learn? If I had to do that, I'd say, I didn't even know what Zoom was before then. And now I feel pretty good about it. I feel like I learned a skill there, but there's a lot more digging to be done on that. So really finding perspective in yourself. And the first thing you can do is just slow down and take that deep breath. It's so critical. And it's the same when we're trying to find perspective in others too. We all have that family member that all we can think of is the negative part of them and think, oh boy, I'm going to have to hear that story over and over again. But it's just, trying to find, and I guarantee there's something good about them. You just have to look. It's oftentimes we're thinking, oh man, they're coming over for dinner and I'm going to have to hear the same story again and again. Look for the positive in that person and you'll see the shift, I promise. And notice what matters to somebody else. While we want to, focus on ourselves and our self care, it's important to find perspective in others and see and focus on the good in others, including family, coworkers, people we lead. And the appreciation thing is huge. We got to show appreciation to each other because it's those little things that pack a punch, like hearing a thank you or a please, or even I appreciate you or I appreciate that. Those little teeny words right there can mean so much to a person's day, and they're very important. And then find perspective in experiences. And guess what? You're here today, you're learning, you're immersing yourself in a new and different experience. Yay, outstanding. Now find the key takeaways for you and savor them, and then share with other people. So, even if you join a session, you go, well, I don't know if I'll like this, but just go in with it with the attitude of what are one or two key takeaways I can get from this? What, and then can I savor it and then share it with other people? Because every experience makes you grow. So we're all lifelong learners, apparently, because we're here. We're here at this summit for this weekend, and we're immersing ourselves in the unknown and learning new things. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what kind of perspective do I have? What kind of perspective do you have? Is it positive or negative? Is it somewhere in the middle? Well, it's different for everybody. Everybody's got a different perspective. What is yours?